You want a piece of me? Today we're going to be making grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. We'll be starting off with our tomato soup first. It'll take the longest to cook, followed up by our grilled cheese sandwich. I went ahead and gathered all my mise en place, which means everything I'm going to need, just a fancy French way of saying it. We're going to start off with some onions, some garlic, sauteing them in for our tomato soup. And we'll add our crushed tomatoes, some chicken stock, and the last but not least, after it's thickened up, our milk to finish it off. Once it's at that stage, we'll start our grilled cheese and show you how to make flawless grilled cheese. Let's get started. First, we're going to start and get our pot heating up. We're going to go ahead to high with that. Going to cut our butter down. Remember, butter scorches pretty easily, so we don't want to let it get too hot before we add our onions. We're going to sweat our onions as opposed to saute them. By sweating, that means that we're adding them to a cold pot, and as it heats up, it's going to cook those onions and start the cooking process. But what that'll do is keep our butter from getting too hot. And we're going to let that saute up and heat up for a minute before we go any further with any other ingredients. All right, now that we've got our heat coming up and our onions are starting to saute away in there, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of garlic. The recipe calls for, I believe, 1 teaspoon. When you have to pour out of that, I'll go and I'll transfer over. And as you can see, years of experience there. And now this will make everything smell even better. We're going to give it a little stir. Let our onions cook until they get on the translucent side. And then the next stage after that is we're going to add a little bit of flour to it and actually make a pan roux before we add any other liquid. And then our soup will thicken up right there in the pot for us. And when that's starting to thicken up and heat, we'll get started on our grilled cheeses. For this, I'm going to need an equal amount of flour to the butter we put in, which was 3 tablespoons. So I'll go with 1. Remember, measuring off our dry ingredients. You want to get a measure and level them off. And that'll be 3. Gonna go ahead and give that a little stir and lower our heat down just a little bit. But you want to get those lumps out of the flour and make it so it's kind of smooth in there. And then we'll add a cup of our tomato. And this is our crushed tomato. Gonna go ahead and add a cup of it in. We will also add a cup of chicken stock. And if you'll notice, I am using the wrong measuring cup. These are dry cup ingredients, but I'm actually using the chicken stock to rinse the tomato, crushed tomato, out of this cup now. With, of course, the last ingredient being the milk once it's come up and thickened. And we're going to want to go ahead and stir that. Make sure we mix real good. We're going to give it a little pinch of our salt and pepper because we season as we go, not too much. Remember, you can always add more. We don't have the ability to take it back out if it's too late. All right, all right, all right. That was for Chef Wetter. We're going to turn on our fry pan at this point, now that we got our soup just about going. And we're going to get it not super hot, but right around medium, a little bit on the upper side. If we get it too hot, we're just going to burn our grilled cheeses. And this will start by taking our bread. We're going to let our pan get good and hot, but I prefer margarine because it's easier to spread on your bread. And you just want to make sure you get a nice good coat. And anywhere you don't is just going to toast for you. So you got a good coat like that. When it hits that, it'll melt and kind of soak into the bread. But get your 2 slices good. And we're still waiting for that to heat up just a little bit. That's actually not bad looking tomato soup. It'll lighten up a little bit when we add a little milk right at the end. That'll be our final step to this. Now some people like, when they do their tomato, they add a little bit of sugar to it just to cut the acidity. I'll leave that up to you as a preference. Starting to get some heat here, so I'll put my bread in. And then I put a piece of cheese down on top of my buttered bread so that the heat from the pan as it grills the bread starts melting my cheese for me, so that by the time it comes to flip, it's stuck to the bread itself. And we can even do this number, make sure we get maximum coverage. And as you can see, we've got our pan going real good, our cheese is melting. Our soup is just coming up to a simmer, almost a boil, which means it's thickened up. So at this point, we're going to take our cup of milk and add it into our tomato soup. And remember, we don't want to let the soup boil after we've added cream. So stir that in. We'll lower our heat down a little bit to about just below medium and let it just kind of finish heating up. Our grilled cheeses should be about ready to flip. Maybe not quite yet, but put them together. Now got a good gauge of where we're looking. Let them finish. And they're going to get a little golden the longer they're on the heat. But now that you put them together, the cheese is melted, they've glued themselves, so you've got a great little hot pocket, so to speak. Our final step with our soup is going to be a little bit of salt and pepper to kind of finish it off, and taste as you go to make sure you don't put too much. There we are, starting to get some color on that. And you just want to make sure you don't let it go too far. Ooh, look at that, nice dark brown. But not burnt, not burnt. There we go. I'll take number 1 off. Got a good hot pan. We'll start right again. Be careful because this is steam coming up there and that will burn you. Our soup is looking wonderful. It seems like our timing might just work out, and we're going to have 2 lovely grilled cheese sandwiches to go with our fresh tomato soup. And I don't know who you are, but on a rainy day, you can't go wrong with that. And last step after you've got your grilled cheeses finished, give them a quick cut. Bring our plate up. We're going to get us some soup. Looks lovely. And we'll just have to find out how it is.